And just this week, I had a session with a couple, and the wife was really unable to own her own part of the conflict. And so, how she chose to apologize, and I'm going to use air quotes for sure with that, she said, "I am so sorry that I made you feel that way." And the husband looked at her and said, "You can't be sorry for my feelings. My feelings are okay. You're not naming your behavior." And so seeing this whole thing unfold, I thought, oh my gosh, this is absolutely classic. I see this all the time in relationships, that people don't necessarily know how to give a true apology. And then we end up owning things that aren't ours or insinuating things that we don't mean. And so let's just call this the Power of a True Apology 101. We're going to break it down today, and we're going to talk about both the heart position of a true apology as well as the practical language around it. Just this week, my two boys, who are ages 10 and 11, were having a classic sibling fight. And I heard one say, "Well, you said you're sorry, but I can totally tell that you didn't mean it." And I giggled because it's true. We all want to feel like when someone is apologizing, we want to feel as though they are genuinely sorry. And so my first tip when it comes to living by heart, we want to make sure that our hearts, when we apologize, are actually in a place of repentance. We want to make sure that we're actually soft and that we've taken the time to humble ourselves, and then also to have empathy for the other party that we've offended or hurt in some way. And this we cannot manufacture. You all have probably had the apology where someone just says the words just to check the box, and then they expect everything to be okay. Or they demand that kind of apology from you just to tick a box that they're carrying around in their own heart. And nothing could be further from true relationship and true intimacy, right? When we have hurt someone, we have trespassed some version of their boundary, be it physical or spiritual or emotional. And so we have to own that, and we have to be humble and realize that every single person has a mistake and a misstep at some point in their lives. And it is perfectly okay and normal to make mistakes. And it is even better to be able to apologize for them, to own them, and to grow from the experience. And so rather than viewing apologies as scary or threatening to our sense of self-worth, I think a great first step is just to realize that it's safe, especially as followers of Jesus. It is totally safe to own our own stuff and to be flawed, because the whole purpose of life with Christ is to depend on Him. And so there's no purpose in us having a self-sufficiency or an ability to be perfect apart from Him. We simply weren't created to be that way. And in reality, God created us to depend on Him and be flawed so that we would learn how to depend more closely on Him. So we need to adjust our beliefs about ourselves and perfection and mistakes and shame. And we need to first really take a hard look at, why is it not safe for me to apologize? If finding humility is difficult, the therapeutic question is, well, what does it mean about me if I have to apologize for something? And that's the road you can take in your time with the Lord and say, show me what I need to know, God. And He will. How many of you know the Lord always gives us honest feedback? He chooses His words so well. He knows just the things that are going to really penetrate our hearts and change us and transform us and make us more like Him. And so really, when we have the opportunity to apologize, we should rejoice, because this is a chance for us to grow and to become more holy as He is holy. And that's the whole point. So as we get into the nitty-gritty of a true apology, I want to start off with this. Check your own heart and to make sure that you're coming from a place of love and connection. If you find that you are actually in a place of defending yourself or thinking a lot about your point and proving your point, or maybe another motive would be to put the other person down, that is when we know that we have not humbled ourselves enough to actually give the gift of a true apology. So let's start there with asking Jesus to soften our hearts so that we can actually feel humble. And may the posture be soft. May it be filled with empathy. May it be ready to own. absolutely be willing to slip into the other person's skin and experience and to be ready to talk about that. I had a run-in with my husband, and it was a silly thing, really. It was a miscommunication, as things often are. But we had a miscommunication about the schedule. And I was under the impression that he was going to take our kids to a football game. And it turned out that he had actually changed his plans, but hadn't communicated that. And so I was like, oh no. And I decided to tell him honestly how that made me feel. And he took several minutes. And if you're married to an introvert, you know how painful this can be as an extrovert, but really to let him have the time. So I gave him some feedback. And I was like, that is really upsetting and hurtful because I had actually made plans thinking that the kids were taken care of. And so what ended up happening is after his long pause, which he was processing, and we can have a video on introverts and extroverts another time, but that's a big one. His next words were so amazing and actually very, very helpful. He was able to lead with validation, and he used my name. He was like, Dawn, I can totally see how you would be super disappointed and that this change in plans I did not communicate. And I understand how that would cause you stress and that you were really looking forward to being able to do the things on your list without the kids at home. And I am truly sorry because I did not want to disappoint you that way. And I certainly didn't want to miscommunicate. And so he was able to slip into my shoes and actually experience what I might have been experiencing at that moment. And I am telling you, I felt so heard. I felt heard, I felt understood. And so any part of me that was just feeling that frustration and that it sort of rolled right off because I saw that he got it. And isn't that so often the case in conflict with our spouse or with someone else? We tend to explain or over-explain or repeat ourselves. And when we find ourselves in that place, often what's missing, 100% of the time, in my opinion, is validation. Because once we've been heard and seen and understood, we then are able to move forward. After you lead with validation, you're gonna actually express empathy for how that person felt. And you might use statements like this. I can totally understand how you might have felt disappointed, upset, frustrated, unseen, invisible, whatever it might be. Leading with validation is probably the number one key that I would say diffuses conflict. Now we're ready to name the behavior that we did that we believe is wrong. This is what we're apologizing for. So in my husband's case, he might say, I am so sorry for how I didn't communicate. Or in the case of the couple in the counseling office, the wife might have said, I am so sorry for how rudely I spoke to you. What she was trying to do before was she was trying to apologize for how that made her husband feel disrespected. That is actually not the way to do it. We need to own our own stuff. And so she simply needed to own her contribution to that relationship dynamic at that time, and which was the way she was speaking to him rudely. She could say, I am very, very sorry for how I spoke so rudely and disrespectfully to you. And then her next step would be that validation, to validate that other person's experience. The third step is to really say, I am truly sorry. Next time, I will be sure to speak lovingly and kindly to you because you deserve that. Or in the case of me and my husband and the miscommunication about the schedule, he might say, I am so sorry. And next time I will communicate more clearly and I will have more advance notice for any change in plan. And so our last step is to humbly and very vulnerably ask, will you please forgive me? And I hope that you as the recipient will be able to say, yes, of course. Of course I forgive you. I love you. I don't want to have conflict with you. So then we're able to mend fences and move forward. But you see, if we skip to the apology at the end without the important parts of empathy, connection, humility, vulnerability, personal ownership, if we skip over all of that, and also if we skip over the validation, a lot of things get lost in the process. And what gets lost the most is actually that sense of intimacy. I always say in my marriage that I want to fail forward. So if he and I are going to have a conflict, and we've had a lot, we've been married for 15 years, and I feel like we've had a lot of chances to fight and learn how to fight well. And I don't want to waste a fight. So if we're going to have a conflict, I want to make sure that we learn something from it. And I'm sure this is like what's so hard about being married to a therapist. But after a conflict, I have often been known to say to my husband, how can we do this better next time? And I might even personalize it. How can I do that better next time? How can I be more open? How can I be more vulnerable? How can I be less defensive? And really to invite that feedback from him of like, so how did our fight go? How would you grade us on that one? And to do that for each person, because it really is something that's painful. And yet I know that God brings these things up in relationships so that we will grow. Relationships are not just to make us happy, they are to make us holy. We are to grow to be more like Jesus as we are having these different conflicts in our families and marriages and relationships. And so the opportunity is always there. And so we don't need to be afraid of it. We have to embrace it. And I say, be as intentional as possible about the conflict that happens in your life, because honestly, I want to grow each and every time. So I am excited because I feel like now that we've had this video, the Lord is going to totally give you an opportunity to have a conflict this week. And whether you are the one apologizing or you are the one receiving an apology, I really believe that this is going to help you have some kind of framework or skeleton to that conversation so that you can grow in intimacy and in communication skills and in your ability to be like Jesus as you build your relationships on earth as it is in heaven.